Okay, so Halloween is one of my favorite movies. The original Halloween. Kim,
Mhm.
would you also say that it's one of your favorite horror
Yes.
movies?
Yes, for sure, definitely.
I think the
And
original. Go ahead.
we'll
Yeah.
get into this, but I like the original Halloween. I like the Rob Zombie Halloween.
So I feel like I cannot, as much as all right. So I've told you that that Halloween is my favorite horror movie of all time, probably in my top 10. I've never seen either of the Rob Zombies because I really don't like him as a director, and I'm just like I just kind of don't want him to like sully what I like about Halloween. So,
I
but
don't
I
think that
mean,
will happen because I don't even look at the Rob Zombie movies as an actual Halloween because there's so many differences. He from the
yeah,
open, like he changes the story drastically, in my opinion. But I don't mind it. Like I like Rob Zombie movies, so I'm cool. And then the sequel that he is like totally his own universe that he's created, which again, cool, great, grand. So I, in general, like all of the Halloweens that have
yeah.
come out. Anything after that, though, like anything after the original Halloween sequel, I lose until H2O.
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, and I'm not as well versed on A Nightmare on Elm Street as you. Like I've seen all of those, but it's been a really long time. Like I really love the
Mhm.
first A Nightmare on Elm Street, but I kind of like waned after that one. But generally speaking, I think the Halloween franchise has been the most when you think about like Friday the 13th, Halloween, all that, like the most consistently interesting to me, even though there are swing and miss movies for sure. There's some that are not
Yeah,
that
I
great.
can agree with that because I do. I mean, Friday the 13th. It's ridiculous. Like
Right.
I don't even care.
Yeah.
And Nightmare on Elm Street also has some ridiculous. Like the sequel is ridiculous, but their third installment, Dream Warriors, is amazing. So
That's like a
like
cult classic now, I think. Like people love that one
I
apparently.
love Dream Warriors. And so, but yes, but consistency wise, and it can't be Scream because we all know that
In
that went
fact,
down.
some people were still commenting on that today. Like today, there were comments about like Scream 6 and people hating it and that kind of stuff, which I still think I think I've mentioned this before, but I think we tapped a nerve with that because a lot of people keep commenting on that video, which is funny. But
I do because yes, I do think that one strikes a nerve with a lot of people because I think that you are either very much like me, a purist, if you
yeah,
will, when it comes to the Scream movies, or you are more of a horror fan, less a Scream fan, and so you like them, and that's where I think it gets blurred. But yes, Halloween is by far the most consistently interesting, able to watch, digestible franchise.
which is interesting, right? Because it has a lot of like mythology branches to it. Like there's the whole druid thing going on, and then you've got kind of the reboot, which is what we're going to talk about, and then whatever
Yeah.
Rob Zombie was doing, which obviously I'm not as familiar with. So
His was just a lot of sex and gore,
that
but
feels like a Rob Zombie movie, probably.
exactly. I'm into it. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. I'm here for it, Rob Zombie.
So what I wanted to do today, this isn't really a review so much. I mean, and I've reviewed, I think, all of the David Gordon Green Halloweens on my channel, except maybe the 2018 one, because I don't know if I was doing as many reviews back then when that came out
Wow.
or not. But I did do Kills and Ends. So what I wanted to talk about was whether or not you see this as being a worthy continuation of what the original film did, because basically this just ignores everything after the first movie, and these three movies, which were all directed by the same director, are supposed to be kind of like a closeout trilogy to the story.
Yeah.
Even though, and I don't know if you followed this at all, I think it was Miramax just won like a bidding war for the rights to Halloween, and so now they're apparently going to make a TV show, not a movie. It's going to be like a TV, like straight to streaming like show, which is interesting to me. Like I don't know what that is going to mean exactly. Of course, I'll
Yeah.
watch it, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
so I will say up front that I think, and I have seen every Halloween, and actually I did like Halloween 2. I thought that that was a pretty good sequel when it
I
came
just
out.
watched it the other day,
Yeah,
actually.
I mean, it's not as good, of course, as the
No.
original, but I liked it. But ignoring all that, I think that Halloween 2018 is my favorite sequel. Like, if I had to just pick any of the ones that exist in relation to the first movie, it is my favorite sequel. We'll talk about the next two, but I think you like Halloween Ends the most of those three.
Well, and if we're looking at the most recent trilogy, yeah, I definitely like Halloween Ends the best. But if we're looking at all the Halloween movies, I love Halloween H2O. Like, I just love that movie so much.
There are things about that movie that I love. That I will say I love more about that than I dislike about it. Like I love what they did with Lori. Like that's to me in my mind, like she would not. I mean, there's two ways to look at it, right? It could be the Lori that we get in 2018 where she's reclusive and is like waiting for him to come back, and then there's the one that just moves on with her life and is successful, but she's still got trauma, understandably, that she's like working through. I like that version of Lori a lot, but I hated the mask in that movie, which is such a
I
just
know.
like trivial, stupid thing to get hung
I
up on. But
know.
like, I don't know why they changed it. It just looked really dumb and like it felt very like 2000s ish kind of like the LL Cool J stuff, the guard, the books, and I don't know. There were some pieces of that I was like, I don't know. Like, whereas the original feels kind of timeless to me. I don't know. So,
Yes. Yes. I can definitely agree with that. Yeah.
but it did also have a pretty definitive ending, right? Minus resurrection, which then like retconned the whole
When
thing. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And that's where I take issue with the 2018 Halloween because I don't like the jump. If we're ignoring everything in between, I don't like that the last we see of Lori is a pretty capable, smart sort of. I mean, she's social, she has friends, she does well in school, and then this total extreme recluse. I still to this day believe that if they had said, okay, fine, we've got how the original Halloween. I don't know why they killed the brother really. I mean, I know why. I mean, like, I get it. That's fine. I don't really care
yeah.
about that storyline. I don't. But I do think that H2O would have set up this. What are you doing?
Is
Owen
that
just started
Michael?
crawling. No, Owen just started crawling into the office with a blanket on top of himself. So it was a little creeps. But I think if in H2O her life gets destroyed again, then she becomes the recluse in 2018.
Um, so yeah, like so again, H2O, I actually really did enjoy that movie a lot. Like I remember seeing that. I think I saw it in theaters
No,
actually when
no.
it came out. And I loved it. I was like, this is a really great like finale to this whole thing. Which of course, like I should have known at the time, there was no way that was going to be the end of the
There'll
whole
never
thing.
be a finale.
Even the way Halloween ends right now, like clearly there's not going to be a finale because they
Yes.
just sold the rights to it to keep doing something.
Okay.
So okay, we were talking about H2O, I think. Yeah. So
Yes.
again,
Yes.
I really did like that movie a lot. And honestly, if they had ended it there, I wouldn't have been sad about that. Probably,
No.
like I thought it was a good conclusion.
Yes.
I thought that Halloween Resurrection was maybe the most awful thing that ever happened to the franchise. I mean, I don't.
It is, but I will guilty pleasure that movie
Yeah.
because it is ridiculous, but I love watching it because I understand that it's ridiculous.
So okay, so David Gordon Green Halloween trilogy.
Yes.
In order of my preferences for these, again, I think that Halloween 2018, and this is just my opinion, obviously, I think it's
Yeah.
the best sequel to the original movie. I think H2O is right after that for me. I really do like
Okay.
H2O a lot.
Okay.
They actually, for me, my enjoyment of them goes in the order that they were released. I think I like Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends the least. And I'll talk about why that is. Now,
Okay.
your turn, Kim. What? And I think I know where you're going with this, but what do you think about
I like
this?
Halloween Ends the most, and then
Okay.
Halloween 2018 would be second, and then Halloween Kills would be last.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's start with I don't know, should we start with the ends or let's go in the order. So let's talk about 2018. That makes the most sense, right?
I
So
guess.
the things that I liked about it, I thought that it did a really good job of nailing the vibe of Halloween overall. Like the whole single tracking shot of him finally
Yeah.
being back in Haddonfield on Halloween, like that's one of the best scenes to me in the entire franchise. Like just it follows him into a house, he gets a hammer, he kills somebody, then
Yeah.
he goes next door and stabs somebody. Like it was just very kind of classic Halloween. And I like the way that they framed everything to where you almost see his face, but you don't quite see his face. And they kind of build, sort of the
Yes, I thought that was done really well, and I like that we don't lose the shape. Like,
right.
he is the shape, and he doesn't talk, he doesn't anything, and that is something I'm glad that they maintain, which is
If
why I don't like Halloween Kills, but anyways, we'll get to that.
Well, that brings me to a point I was going to bring up. I'm glad you said that. The only, well, it's not the only, but one of the major criticisms I have of the 2018 movie is I don't like that it's called Halloween. I'm like, because I think it should have been called The Shape. That would have been an awesome title for it. Just like a return to that as a character. And then I don't know what you would do if you would call the next one Halloween Kills or not. But I just
Probably not.
hate that the original.
The shape ends.
Or it could have been called Halloween Returns, but I don't know if that's too sequely. I don't know.
But if that's what it is, then that's what it is. No, I agree, but that was like the start of doing that, just naming the reboots the original, which doesn't get confusing for anyone.
Did Scream do that at some point?
I thought they did. I thought when they came out with
Scream 5, maybe?
Fifth, it was just
Yeah.
Scream again.
Right.
Like basically.
Yeah.
So, and I like that we get Laurie's family. I think that's an interesting there is just I don't know. For me, she's so unstable. Like, because I just rewatched this the other day as well. And so the whole scene in the restaurant where she's like crying and being like, I get why she's upset, but then their response, like, it just all felt really dramatic. And we have not seen anything leading up to this. So for me, it felt very in your face.
Right. I mean, you're right. I mean, it is a very huge transition. I mean, I guess at that point it had been 40 years or whatever,
yes!
But like from where we saw her to that point. But I think for me, the major story beats mostly work. Like even like the whole podcasting piece of it, like that's fine. Like interviewing her, him getting out, just the way he behaves felt like kind of classic Michael Myers and all that. And even honestly, the ending setup where it's like her house is basically just designed to be like a showdown.
I love that. That is probably my like when the daughter says it's not a cage, it's a trap.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is beautiful. Like, and for me, I think it was a really beautiful moment because it shows that like the daughter, yes, went through all this trauma, but like at her core, like really took what her mother told her and maintained those skills. And so I liked that element.
Well, there was one story beat the first time I saw it in theaters that I hated. Like I walked out and was like, why did they do this? And I bet you can guess what it is. Can you guess which part of the movie that I was like, what in the world are they doing?
No.
It was all right. It's the part where they hit Michael Myers with a car, and then the psychiatrist doctor puts on his mask and is basically like,
yeah, that was weird. That was weird and unnecessary.
Upon rewatches, I still didn't love it, but I didn't hate it as much because it was sort of like he's just a crazed. It's like the whole idea of like the crazed doctor is just going to an extreme to figure out why he ticks the way he does, almost kind of thing, like getting him out in the wild, all that sort of stuff, which they never explicitly say this, but I think we're meant to assume that the doctor gets him off the bus somehow, right? To see what he will do when he's out in the world. That was sort of the read between the lines thing that I took away from it, but I don't know.
I mean, I can see that because I did question when I was watching it the other day, like when the kid goes on the bus and he's just like sitting there. I'm like, that's weird that the bus crashed and all these inmates came off and he's just like sitting there like nothing happened. Like, wouldn't he be more hurt? And so that makes a lot of sense. If he caused the crash, if he knew this was going to happen or planned it, then he wouldn't be as banged up. So I could absolutely see that interpretation. I don't hate it.
So, yeah, I mean, again, that was a little bit of a weird, I guess, plot element that they weren't in there. But overall, I really did. I remember leaving the theater and thinking, even though I didn't like a couple of things, like I was mostly really happy with the way it ended. And actually, I would have been fine if that one was the end of it. Like he's in the fire. You don't know if he's alive, whatever. Like that was kind of a cool showdown between him and Laurie there at the end. But of course, because it did so financially well, like it didn't have a huge budget. And actually, they filmed a lot of it in Wilmington, North Carolina, which I don't know if you knew that or not.
I did not know that. Cool.
Yep. And a lot of Halloween Kills was filmed there too, which is kind of cool. In fact, that bar that's featured there, I think, is in Wilmington also, which is kind of cool. Yeah. I know, right? Kind of awesome. But, so for Halloween 2018, you've kind of talked a little bit about this, but you didn't like what they did with Laurie mostly, or was there other stuff there that you were just sort of like...
I mean, that's my biggest thing is how they made her character, and to me, it made it very extreme. And Judy Greer, who plays the daughter, is always a really interesting casting choice for me because I see her as a very comedic actress.
Yeah.
And so even just upon seeing her as the person cast as the daughter didn't didn't necessarily give me this dramatic sense about it. So I just thought that was an interesting casting choice for the daughter. And then it all just felt very fast, which I understand. We're trying to like pick up on 40 years that we haven't seen here. But for us, the audience, it felt like a lot all at once.
And that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I was fine with her casting, but I didn't. I mean, it was okay. Like, but I will say, I thought Allison was really well cast, the granddaughter.
I
Like through
really,
all the
really love
movies,
her character, and yes.
yeah, she was good. So okay, now Halloween Kills, which I think honestly, well, I don't know if I would say. I think Halloween Ends is actually the most divisive of this trilogy, but people were very up and down on Kills. Like some people like loved it, some people
Yeah.
really hated it. You know, so why don't you start us with Halloween Kills since I did 2018? Like, what was sort of your takeaway from that one?
And we've talked a lot about this already. I don't like hate it. I definitely don't hate Halloween Kills. I would watch it again. I don't like the violence because it strayed so much from what we've seen of The Shape.
Yeah,
And I did like the community element. And that's where I do think watching them, if you watch them all together, I think it becomes this really interesting community portrait. And you can pick out people that show up in the later movies.
yeah.
And so I liked that they did that. My issue then is when I go back and watch Halloween 2018, they don't seem to have as much of that then. I feel like
Right.
it just sort of showed up in Halloween Kills because that one sheriff guy who was there the night he was arrested, like he's very concerned about Michael Myers, but some of like the new generation of like they don't seem to have that same concern of like, oh no, he's back. But in Halloween Kills, they're like, no, no, not Michael Myers, he's back.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you about the community element. I actually think that's the strongest point of this whole trilogy. That just
Yes.
this idea of like a community trying to move past this nightmare,
And
and
one
they
of my
just
favorite
can't.
moments from Halloween Ends, which we'll get to.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, and I did love that component of it.
yeah.
But I think you're totally right about it. It does feel like a little bit of a departure from the first movie, and I think the reason, and I'm just speculating, obviously, but I think the reason for that is I bet the first one got greenlit 2018 with the understanding that you want to make it a little bit like the original, and if it's successful, then you've got a little more creative freedom beyond that to
Yeah,
like. That would be my guess. I mean,
I'm
who knows?
sure. I guess for me, and because I have seen the Rob Zombie Halloween, like I know Rob Zombie's style. And that
Yeah.
movie is 1,000% Rob Zombie style. So I don't mind any divergent elements in that sense because I know that it goes with his sort of his aesthetic. I don't know this director at all, but I guess because the 2018 did kind of maintain some of that original element, it felt like you went in a very clear direction, in the opposite direction for Halloween Kills. And I
Well,
don't know why you
it,
needed to.
It was a weird dichotomy with Kills because on the one hand, it felt like it felt like literally it picks up as soon as the first movie ends,
Yes,
basically,
yes.
right? Like, so it's like,
Which is
okay,
what the original does too, you know?
right. It's a very clear continuation of that story, but aesthetically, it was almost like, what can we do in this movie? Like, what can we get away with? Like, how
Yeah,
crazy can we make Michael Myers? And like the moment he walks out of that house and just slaughters firefighters, I was like, whoa, this is like broad daylight kind of stuff.
yeah.
Borderline action movie, maybe
Yes,
not
yeah.
quite to that extreme, but close to that.
There wasn't that same element of, like, anticipation and suspense.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I
who's
mean,
hiding there? What's in this shadow? It was all very like, I'm here in the shadow and I'm gonna cut your head off. And you're like, oh, okay.
but it is funny having watched recently Halloween Ends again the other night, how much they were kind of teeing up for that movie, right? Like when he goes to the
Yes.
neighbors next door and he kills that guy and like cuts that woman's throat with the light bulb, but it doesn't kill her, and how she shows up later. But there is some like insanely brutal stuff in this movie. Like I remember seeing it in theaters and be like, holy crap, like this is way beyond,
Yeah.
what you would have expected. But again, I like that they spend most of their time kind of focusing on Haddonfield as its own character
Yeah.
almost. But there were some really dumb things in this. And I think we were talking about this maybe the other day, but like the whole thing where they're in the hospital and the town is like worked up into a frenzy and they're chasing this guy who's clearly not Michael Myers. Like, I mean, they had his picture on the TV earlier in the movie and you see how huge he is. And this is just this little guy that's clearly scared out of his mind, whatever, who commits suicide, which clearly they're trying to work some commentary in there about like mob mentality and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But so that, I mean, and the ending is kind of interesting too. But before I get to that, I mean, what else with kills, I guess, stands out for you as like good or bad, one way or another?
There's the one scene where everyone is attacking Michael Myers that
Yeah, that's what I was
I
going to get to. But yeah,
yeah, well, that because there's that and there's another scene that I want to talk about, but I like that scene, but then and he's getting pretty beat up, but
right.
then it turned now again he's machine Michael Myers and he's killing all these people, and I'm like that doesn't seem. I think when we talk about the shape, when we talk about the boogeyman, what's scary about the boogeyman is that it doesn't have that carnal sort of presence, that it's this shadow that lingers and yet chaos and death follow it. And that's not what Halloween Kills. Halloween Kills felt like a slasher movie.
Right.
And
Right. A
that's
more
not.
like a Jason Voorhees
Yes,
style kind
yes.
of
It was
thing. Yeah.
absolutely more Voorhees than
Well,
like.
and before we talk a little bit more about that final scene, I will say the other thing that I loved in this movie, and it almost made me wish they would have made the whole movie just kind of a flashback thing. I love the flashback scenes in this movie, like the beginning,
Yeah.
like that stuff was, and even like the way they made that the actor look like Donald Pleasance, like it was kind of insane how like, and I saw behind the scenes stuff on that where they basically put a bunch of prosthetics on his face and then just sort of CG'd a little bit over it, but it looked
Okay.
really good.
Yeah.
So, but that actually leads me to another point. I'm all over the place here, I
Okay.
know, but
Go for it.
so the way that I would have started 2018, if it were up to me to write the script, I would have actually started that movie with a flashback about how he got caught, and it would have been like it kind of answering the question of like, well, so how is he not dead? Because at the end of the original Halloween, he gets shot like 6 times, point blank
Yes.
range. I would have started that movie with him just sort of hobbling down the street and eventually being arrested. And then he ends up in the insane institution after having undergone surgery. But then that begs the question, is there something supernatural about him? Does that take away from the mythos if you like get into how does he like survive all this kind
I
of
do think
stuff?
it takes away some of that because I never really had that same like, how did he get here? Like that. But then again, maybe I'm filling in from everything I've seen before, so it's hard to know because you can't really ignore everything you saw in between. Like he could have
Yeah.
done this too. We can't. Um, but
But that's so that leads to the end of Halloween Kills, where he's basically like you were just describing it, like he's getting eviscerated by the town. I mean, they're like hitting him with boards
yeah,
and bats and all this, and then he just comes back to life and kills literally everybody. And then he goes on and kills Lori's daughter, which I did not expect that ending.
I did not either, and that's what I wanted to talk about. So okay. He's not her brother. Like they've
Right.
decided, they make a comment about it in 2018. Fine. But it does feel personal.
Yeah.
And I know that there is some level of horror in like it is personal for no other reason than he's just fixated on her. Like
Yeah.
that's fine with me. But I guess then if he's that fixated on Lori, why does he even bother to kill anybody else?
Right.
Like that to me doesn't feel like it goes together. And because like going after the granddaughter and then like very blatantly killing the daughter, like all feels very personal to who Lori is, but so much of what he's been doing in this new reboot isn't really even about her.
Well, and I will say, and I know we're done talking about 2018. That is what I liked about 2018 is it felt like he was just randomly killing people like he did in the first movie a little bit more. But it is weird that he's fixated on her. And I don't know if it's because he recognizes her from 1978 and is like, I never finished this. And he's constantly back at that. Or I don't know. It is weird. Like, I don't know.
And that could be, and I'm fine with that. But then it's like, I guess like when you kill her daughter, like to me, it feels like he's going, nah, 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 boo, boo, I killed your daughter. And like, that's not
Well,
Michael Myers, you
in,
know?
in that scene, was she standing in his bedroom? I mean, wasn't she in his house? Like,
Yes.
so I don't know
Yes.
if that was part of it. Like he was just going back to his bedroom or like he normally
And here's
does or
another
whatever.
blonde girl, and I'm going to kill her like I did my
Right.
sister. I mean, and it's very possible that is, but unfortunately, it has such a connection to Lori that if they had done
Yeah.
even one little thing to make it more about his first kill when he was a child, then like I'd be okay with it. But to me, it felt like a slap in Laurie's face, and that felt too human for
Yeah,
my
and so
liking.
I will say, so there again, like things I liked about Kills, things I didn't like. I definitely didn't love it as much as the first one. But the one thing it started to get into, especially like in the final moments, because Lori says something about this when she's talking to the sheriff who survived the first movie, whatever.
Yes.
They kind of broached the question of like, no, he's no man. He's more than a man. He's immortal. Like, and I was when I think about Halloween Ends, I was like, okay, they're finally gonna like explore this question a little bit more of like, how is he alive? Like, how does he survive all this stuff? Which there's good and bad to that. Like we just said, like how much does that detract from like the idea of the boogeyman making him
Yeah.
immortal, all that kind of stuff. So then we get Halloween Ends, which was it was a complete departure in a lot of ways from the story. Not complete, but a major departure from what was set up with the first two movies, I would say. There are
Yes.
things about it that I like, but it almost felt to me like an experimental film in some ways. Like it didn't, I don't know, it didn't feel like a natural conclusion to the two movies that had come before, in my opinion. So that was
No,
my
I can
biggest
agree
thing
with
about
that. I can definitely agree with that, that it doesn't feel, and maybe what would have been better, and I don't have an answer or solution for this because they make reference to it in Ends, is that since Halloween Kills, there have been these deaths and suicides and murder. Like there's been this evil
it.
in the
Right.
town, but if they had maybe somehow lingered on that or done more with that, then maybe it would have felt like it connected to Halloween Kills. But maybe that's why I like it, because it feels a little bit more experimental. But like, yeah, I can agree that it doesn't feel like it follows up necessarily.
Well, there are some threads there, and I think you actually pointed out one when we were talking about this a while back. I think when it first came out last year that I didn't pick up on the first time I saw it. But you know, like early on, they're kind of showing like you were saying these murders around town, and the sheriff's like, no, Michael wouldn't do that. He doesn't use a gun, that sort of thing. Did you notice the? And I think I think you mentioned this to me, but the mom of the kid who dies in the first movie, who gets impaled on the thing wearing the costume, the mom is the one hanging there, like she killed herself. I don't because it's like
Yeah.
that idea of the evil just perpetuating itself, even
Yes.
though he's not doing it, which that was a
Yeah.
cool theme.
And ultimately, I feel like that is what, like when you say he's not a man, he's immortal. I guess I interpret it, and I think this what Halloween Ends was trying to say is that like, because it's as if evil is its own persona, and it
Right.
got placed in Michael Myers, and it's like it like infects the town and it infects people, and I get like an evil never dies, and so it
Yeah.
just has to kind of get passed along among people, and that's where, and who knows where Michael got. I mean, if that's what they want to make a TV show about, then where did the evil come from that Michael sort of got
Well,
infected with? I would like to see that.
and it felt like they were trying to get to that point with Corey Cunningham, right? Like
Yeah.
they're trying to show you like how somebody can become that embodiment of evil. And the thing is, I don't hate that idea. Like I think that's a cool idea for a movie. But again, just the disconnect from like kind of the larger arc that had been a little bit more developed with the first two movies was a little bit tough for me. But I did like that idea of evil as sort of its own kind of self-perpetuating thing, and he was sort of the source of it for a long time. But now this kid apparently was going to be the one to sort of carry it forward. Maybe obviously it ends in a
Yeah.
way that was a little bit. So there's a scene in the movie, and I know I'm skipping over a lot. We can talk more about this too, but there's a scene in the movie where Corey, who's constantly getting bullied, this kid who really is
Yeah.
kind of I don't know if I'd say the protagonist, but protagonist slash antagonist of the movie in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
I mean, yeah, he
he's
is.
he's he's getting bullied and he gets dropped off a bridge. And what we come to realize and find out is that Michael Myers has basically been living in a sewer since I guess 2019 or whatever it
Yeah.
was. And he's
Yeah.
all like, and the implication is he basically just barely survived the attack by the mob. Like he's all like disfigured and kind of hobbled and not his
Mhm.
usual self. But he looks into his eyes and it's like a transfer of evil occurs or something. It's a
Yeah.
weird. So upon rewatch, I really tried to focus on this scene because I was like, the first time I saw this, I didn't really get what they were going for. I rewatched it like 2 nights ago, really tried to pay attention to that part of it in particular, and was like, I still don't really get what they're trying to do here. Like it just felt a little bit nebulous. I'm like, was he trying to say, I understand your trauma and you've got the potential to be like me kind of thing? It's weird. Like, I don't know what your take on that was, but.
And I agree with you. And I guess if I were going to say like that it is that, but that's where I would say it's not Michael Myers. We can go back to the original Halloween and say like that Michael Myers doesn't exist. That the moment that boy killed his sister, he was the shape.
Yeah.
And so the evil entity
I told you it was gonna happen.
Recognizes in Corey, it's like almost like it was like a demon. Like this entity that possessed Michael Myers recognizes it in Corey, that here is this person that has maybe the capacity to do this evil. And so now, because maybe the physical Michael Myers can't. Maybe his body just can't carry this evil entity anymore. And so it needs a new vessel.
Yeah, and I like what you're, I think, kind of suggesting with that, which is to say that, I mean, Michael Myers is just symbolic for evil and how there's that like, potential for it in everybody, potentially, maybe, right? And that's sort of what it's kind of building toward a little bit. But then, there's that scene where he tricks the cop into going to the sewer and then he holds him so Michael can kill him and he kind of revitalizes himself a little bit. It's kind of a weird sequence a little bit, but I guess
it is. But like, I think that's what is happening in a sense. So, which is interesting then. And again, I'm jumping, but like Corey sort of becomes the new shape and he's going after people. He's doing all this, but then he dies very easily. And
I was like, so, because if he's supposed to be the next Michael, like it was just a weird, I don't know, kind of thing.
And I mean, I could maybe say like, well, that's because the evil hadn't been inside him long enough to like fortify him. I mean, could we argue?
Him, right? To use that word they keep coming back to in that movie, which is infect, like you're infected by it or whatever.
Yeah, I bet the tablet battery did die. Okay, why don't you go watch something?
So one of the points that was making me think about was that scene where Laurie recognizes that a very real change has happened. And we're actually skipping over the whole first part of the movie, which I know is like your least favorite thing, what happens in the very beginning. And as parents, it's like terrifying to like think about that and what's happened. And I won't talk about it.
But yes, that opening scene that I don't like to talk about.
Well, but I think that's one of the most terrifying moments in the whole franchise because it's just like an everyday occurrence.
It is an everyday occurrence, which is like, I guess that the context of like this town that's infected by evil sees it as, I mean, I guess that nobody was there. Do they think that Corey did it on purpose? Like, clearly not everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there are definitely people that do.
Well, even that kid's dad, right? Jeremy's dad is when he's talking to Laurie later, he's like, I know that he's a good kid. I knew he was. That was not, but when I saw him on the street, the hair on the back of my neck stood up.
It was
like that whole thing was cool.
Yes.
And then when he's doing the Michael Myers pose by the bush and Laurie sees him out the window, like the whole kind of thing there. And I love the way Laurie handles all of that, where she basically follows him and she's kind of turned into a little bit of a shape herself in the way that she's able to like vanish and all of that kind of stuff,
Yes. Yeah. No, and I will say that feels consistent with the movies we've gotten. Like Laurie's not going to take crap from anybody or anything. And that's why like that moment later where she pretends to kill herself, but she's really shot the pumpkin. Like, I think that felt very consistent with the Laurie that we met.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I mean, she's got a good sense of what and who Michael Myers is based on all of her experiences, and we see that show up. Sorry, I'm just laughing at the whole situation.
But so then I guess like by the end of it, the shape is revitalized. I mean, he's back to his like full shapeness, and they're having a showdown. So like, could we argue that's because Corey is dead? Like.
So, and I guess the question is, what do you think about the ending where it kind of goes from Corey being dead to it kind of becomes like we got to have a traditional
Look,
battle between
my
Michael
head is
and
tipping
Lori
this way,
tacked on
but
here.
it's actually tipping that way.
I feel like the final showdown was necessary because to get to where we ultimately get, like, I don't know how it ends from there if there isn't. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, they seem to very clearly. I think they wanted to try it in so much as they could to leave like no doubt that Michael Myers himself is gone with the whole like junkyard grinder thing.
Yes, and I appreciate that, and that's why I don't know what they're gonna do because I mean God, I hope they're not.
It's probably another reboot. I'm sure it's another reboot of some kind.
Because that is what I've wanted for so long with Michael Myers is like grind him, like do something that there was no possible way that his body could take form again.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, when she's got him like basically pinned to her kitchen table and is essentially like bleeding him out, like and at that point I was like, if they end it this way, that's ridiculous because obviously he's gonna come back to life. And I like the fact that they had like a procession for the town, right? They're kind of bringing it back to that idea of like this is Haddonfield itself trying to heal from like 4 decades. Justice. Right. Yeah. And I love when they're like, "Oh, this isn't the way this works." Then they're like, "Oh, it is tonight." You know that.
It is.
Which, you know what? Like in a small town like that, I wouldn't be surprised if the local law enforcement, if this were like a situation where there was just a person who had been causing terror for 40 years, that might be how they handle it, right? Like I don't know. So anyway, yeah, like I really actually do, and the thing that one of the things I like most about this is the very very end where they kind of mirror the final shots of the original movie where you see the house, full frames, but everything's peaceful. It's not playing the music, like she has some kind of resolution. But of course, in the final frame, you see the mask sitting on her coffee table or whatever because I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Maybe she's it's finally done and she owns Michael Myers as a concept.
I mean, I think that's an interpretation. And I like that the Allison is leaving because I think that the way that and this is why I like that character, is they were sort of setting up, and this is why I could see them justifying killing her parents in Halloween ends 2018 and Kills, is because she could very much turn into Lori. She could become a recluse. She could become everybody she cared about, her boyfriend, her friend, everybody she knew was dead. And so her friend. And so she does start to become that. But at the end, she leaves. She's not going to stay in Haddonfield, and she's not going to become Lori. Yes, I very much enjoyed the end of that movie. It felt like an ending. It felt resolved. I feel good about it. I don't need anything else.
Yeah, and the question becomes like, because it was my least favorite, just because, and again, I didn't hate it just because it was so kind of experimental in what it was. I don't know what I would have done differently, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if it would have been worthwhile to have like a traditional, let's have like a whole movie that's Michael versus Laurie, which was basically the first movie, kind of.
Yes, no, and look what because and that's where I feel, and I know Josh was telling me that a lot of people didn't like it because it wasn't a movie really about Michael Myers, but I'm okay with that because what else could you do? Like, he had a showdown with Laurie, he had a showdown with the whole freaking town, like. What else do you want him to do that he hasn't already done?
Yeah, I think they were, at least for me, they were on the right track in terms of like, so what can we explore that's interesting? And the idea of like the continuation of evil is an interesting because it begs the question, like, what did was there somebody before Michael and he took on?
Now I like want to write that. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, and I've thought about that before. Can you publish fan fiction? But you can if you're making money off of it, and it's like a property. Like, you cannot do that.
Yes, that makes sense.
Which makes sense.
We'll just buy the rights to Michael Myers, like.
So we can afford that, right? It can't be that much, I wouldn't think. So here's the end question for us, Kim. Do you think these 3 movies added something to the original movie, or were they not worth doing at all? Like,
no, I definitely think they added. I do.
Yeah.
I think they added a lot, especially now. I don't like that they ignore all the in-betweens, but if they are going to do that, then I definitely think these movies add to just what we saw in the original Halloween. And I think they were worth making, and I don't love everything they decided to do, but I think overall they did a really decent job of building out what this thing, the shape, this evil is and what it means to this town.
Yeah, I agree. So Yeah, I mean, even though I feel like the trilogy itself had some very strong moments overall, and I would say overall I do enjoy it as a thing, and it had some down moments. I do think that ultimately it added some good stuff to the mythos. Now, again, if
Yes.
I were writing it, I probably would have done some things differently, but like overall, I thought it was good.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
okay, cool. Well, we made it through the commentary, which so anyway, this is going to be our last Halloween thing, and what I'm going to do actually is post on social media like this and all the October. I guess we're really starting with September with Pumpkinhead stuff, and be like, want stuff to watch? Like this is our slate of things we've done recently. That's good. But so I know that we're going to see Thanksgiving. I almost said Thanksgiving, but Thanksgiving whenever that comes out.
And I do want to see 5 Minutes at Freddy's. I do want to watch that.
Jonah saw it, and
Yes.
so he did like it a lot.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, and it's on Peacock, right? So we could watch it and talk about it. So yeah, so maybe we could do that next. We could do that, and then we could do Thanksgiving, which I think would be good.
I almost called it Thanksgiving too. Yes, Thanksgiving. Yes.
So maybe it's going to be the quintessential Thanksgiving horror movie moving forward. I guess
I'm excited for it.
Yeah,
trailers look good. Looks like a good slasher. So I'm like, let's do this. Let's kill some people on Thanksgiving.
I thought you were going to say let's serve it up because it's Thanksgiving.
I'm not as good with the puns as you are. That's your job. That's all you.
Okay, well we'll wind it down. We'll be back soon. If you haven't seen the DGG Halloween trilogy, I would say watch them if you like the original movie. Just go check it out. So, all right, we'll be back soon.